Hello and welcome to the Last Wicket. I'm your host, Benny. Thank you for joining us. And before we get into the crux of what we're going to be talking about, let me welcome my co-host, Mike. Hey, Mike.
Hey Benny, good to be back.
Yeah. So yesterday, I wake up to a news article that says tributes start pouring in for Pujara, and my instant reaction was like, "Oh no, did he die?"
Oh my God.
I'm so sorry, that's dark, but I'm so used to seeing bad news online these days that my brain is just so wired to you hear the word tributes and you just think someone's dead. But I'm glad to report that all's well with Pujara and all's well with Pujara, but in slightly, well, I guess in mixed news, I guess. He has stepped down or he's retired from all forms of cricket. Now, obviously, Pujara was not necessarily in the picture as far as the Indian team was concerned over the last couple of years. But and I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but he obviously was a huge a central figure to India's successes in the test format over the last decade. So we'll talk all about that, but I just wanted to quickly just read his announcement, his retirement announcement here. So he had posted on Instagram. As a little boy from the small town of Rajkot, along with my parents, I set out to aim for the stars and dreamt to be a part of the Indian cricket team. Little did I know then that this game would give me so much invaluable opportunities, experiences, purpose, love, and above all, a chance to represent my state and this great nation. Wearing the Indian jersey, singing the anthem, trying my best each time I stepped on the field, it's impossible to put into words what it truly meant. But as they say, all good things must come to an end, and with immense gratitude, I have decided to retire from all forms of Indian cricket. I would like to thank the BCCI and Saurashtra Cricket Association for the opportunity and support through my cricket career. I'm equally grateful to all the teams, franchises, and counties I've been able to represent over the years. I wouldn't have made it this far without the invaluable guidance of my mentors, coaches, and spiritual guru. To them, I shall always remain indebted. I just wanted to read this announcement because, usually when cricketers retire, they obviously will put out a statement on social media saying pretty much all the stuff that, Pujara just stated in his announcement. But the thing about Pujara, again, we'll talk more about this. One of his qualities, there's always been a very straightforwardness with him. Like everything seems to come from a genuine place. At least it appears to be so. And so when I read this announcement, I couldn't help feeling a little sad because he didn't seem to fit in the stereotype of the typical Indian cricketer that we now come to associate with, right? He's not flashy, he's not like an IPL star, um, and he's almost like a throwback to the older era, the Tendulkar Dravid era. And so him realizing that it's time to hang up his boots and not just like play domestic cricket, but just be like done with it all. It's just like an end to an intriguing chapter in Indian cricket. So let's start with what was your reaction when you heard about Pujara's retirement?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, no surprises as such. Obviously, he's not been part of the side since the 2023 WTC final. So it's not like we were expecting him to fight his way back and play again at the age of 37. Um, but yeah, it was a good moment to just reflect back on a tremendous career, lovely achievements, great series wins, and to which he's contributed immensely. And yeah, really been that supporting role to the four, five, six of the Indian batting lineup by soaking up the ball, soaking up good spells, and really setting them up for success over 103 Test matches, which is again a phenomenal achievement. Um, and yeah, in many ways, I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit more on this, but just his style of batting, he was a little bit of a throwback, as you said. There were probably three or four other batters, or there are three or four other batters in world cricket today who bat like him, but yeah, it's getting fewer and fewer due to multiple reasons. And um it was, yeah, I think for me personally, like he replaced Rahul Dravid, who was my hero growing up. And I never thought that I would, really start admiring somebody who took Rahul Dravid's place, but it really did not take long to fall in love with Cheteswar Pujara.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at his numbers first, he's played 103 tests, scored 7,195 runs, average of 43.6, 19 hundreds, and a high score of 206. Now, what do you, when you see those numbers, do you think that's an accurate reflection of Pujara's test career?
Yeah, that's going to be a tough one because I think the wickets have changed so much in this last decade. Recently, Ravi Ashwin on his YouTube channel who hosted Rahul Dravid, and even they were acknowledging the fact that the pitches in this era have been so much more challenging than Rahul Dravid's era. And of course, Pujara being the number three will be compared to Rahul Dravid. He has the second most runs for India at number three, so he's obviously up there. Um, I think numbers wise, he's a better batsman than that average of 43. There's very little doubt about it. And the easiest way to call that out is looking at his performances in Australia, the last two tours, against one of the best. I would actually call it the best bowling lineup. I wouldn't even say one of the best. I would say the best bowling lineup, the most balanced bowling lineup. He just showed up and batted with a lot of patience and, you know, and tired them down, which is why we had such a great success winning two back-to-back series down under, which no other Asian team has won even a single one. So I think that to me tells me that he's closer to Rahul Dravid than most people think. And I think there's probably thoughts of entertaining that he's achieved, whether as a quality of batter is he as good as Rahul Dravid or was he as good as Rahul Dravid? Maybe not, just because Rahul Dravid also had the one day game to back up. But in terms of achievements in his Test career, I really do think that he's done some things which even Rahul Dravid could not.
Yeah, let's get into it. I know that one of the first things that you were interested in talking about was, just for first memories of Pujara when he burst onto the scene. Why don't you go first and then I'll share mine?
Yes, it was a test match in India, India playing Australia back in 2010. It was, I believe, his first international 50, so it's not something that people are going to forget anyways. But I think the reason where why it also remains really memorable to me is Rahul Dravid was struggling a little bit for form, and he was playing that game, and I think he'd not scored too many in the first innings. And during the chase, which was a tricky chase on a tricky pitch, a fourth innings chase, uh, Pujara was promoted and asked to bat at number three instead of Dravid, and he batted with just amazing fluency, like the way he handled spin, and that of course is not a one-off. He did that for majority of his career. The way he had handled Mitchell Johnson, it was really, really great. And he scored 72 of, if I remember right, 89 or 90 balls and very, very fluent innings. And just remember that very quickly, very vividly, I should say. And during that time, he had such a proven track record from a first class perspective that there were people who had been, bloggers like us who had been constantly talking about Pujara. I remember BCCI, the board cricket channel that's still on YouTube. Gaurav Sethi, who runs that, used to have posters of Cheteswar Pujara at that time, calling him Che Guevara, like
Yeah, I
that
remember that.
comparison. Yeah,
Yeah.
so he came with a lot of anticipation, and so many times we've seen youngsters come in with all this anticipation and just disappointing. But Pujara just walked in as if, yep, he belonged. So yeah, that is definitely my first memory, and it clearly felt that he had arrived.
I echoed all of that because literally my first memory of Pujara was that same test match. I remember there was a lot of buzz around Pujara, and to me it was extra memorable just because, like you said, Dravid was struggling for form, but just in general, a generation of Indian batters were coming towards the end of their career. I mean, Sachin Tendulkar just like a couple of years out maybe from retiring from Test cricket as well. So it was just a time of overdue transition almost where we needed, new players to come and step up. And, we at that point we were wondering who is going to fill the shoes of a Dravid, who's going to fill the shoes of um Tendulkar, Lakshman, and to some extent Ganguly, and we were looking for this place, and obviously the Rohits and the Kohlis were always there, but we still needed someone solid in the test format. And so when Pujara came in, there was a lot of expectations. I personally was hoping that if you can be as half as good as Dravid, that's fine. We just need someone very stable and like secure. And that second innings, I still remember, even though it was like almost 15 years ago now, I still remember the sense of almost inevitability that he was batting with. Like when he played the strokes, it was like he not necessarily a full-blown veteran, but he looked very comfortable. He looked like he belonged in international cricket. And just knowing that is just the start. And just by that innings alone, in the second innings, I was like, okay, I think India's got its number three for at least a short while. And of course, he's gone on to do so much more. But and he's also seems to be one of those cricketers who almost seem to be very steady. If you look at his career arc, some unlike let's take the example of a Virat Kohli. Like when he started out, not the best start to his test career, right? Like he was kind of like average when he started out, and then he just like his rise was very steady, and he kind of peaked around that 2015, 2016 time point, and then kind of had that dip. Whereas with Pujara, at least anecdotally, when I think about it, it seemed like a very steady, like straight line, and then that final dip. So yeah, he's just that one cricketer that, when you talk about filling the shoes of a Dravid or a Tendulkar, and obviously Kohli and Tendulkar, that's a different conversation for another day. But I think Pujara more than adequately was able to step in into Dravid's shoes.
Yeah, I think the point you mentioned about the transition is important because before India lost the Test series to New Zealand last year, the last series at home that they had lost was all the way back in 2012 to England.
Hmm.
And England was obviously a really good side with the likes of Alistair Cook and Kevin Peterson and Monty Panesar and all those guys and Graham Swan, of course. But during that series, when India went down 1-2, it was obviously very shocking to see all these experienced heads. And of course, the likes, well, I guess Tendulkar was still there, Dravid and Lakshman had retired, but Tendulkar was there and Kohli was there, Pujara was there. And Pujara was really the only one who was standing tall in that test series as well. So I think it was another sign that, while there was still a lot more trust in Kohli, considering he had been already a World Cup winner and done extremely well in the one day format at that point, there was still questions around some of the other younger batters. But Pujara again stood tall. He scored 200 in that first match and won India the game, which is why we got the series lead. So yeah, he didn't take a lot of time to adapt to international cricket, particularly at home, which sometimes is looked down upon by Indian fans, which
Yeah.
we're the only fan base that looks down on our players for performing at home. Like pretty much everybody else just
Yeah.
just loves seeing David Warner scoring hundreds after hundred in
Hmm.
Australia, or whoever else, Ben Duckett scoring hundreds in England. Nobody has a problem with that, but we look down on that, and it's unfortunate because those were some really really great performances against good quality attacks. Some of the tracks were tricky as well. Um, yeah, so a really good steady start, and didn't obviously have the peak that Virat Kohli had. Like there was no year where he was averaging 90 or anything like that, but nonetheless he was consistent performer, and despite his methods, he found ways to succeed. Has 100 in Joburg, has hundreds in England. Of course, Australia, he comfortably conquered, particularly in that 2018 series, and then 2021, even though he was probably not at his best, he found ways to just support the team and make sure he contributes enough so that it's easier for the likes of Pant and others to make merry once the ball got older. So yeah, conquered all conditions from that perspective, despite having somewhat conventional technique in a tough batting era.
And I wanted to very quickly react to what you just said about, like as Indian fans, in general, we seem to be harsher on uh, players who perform well at home compared to, abroad. Um, I really feel that's because, at least, in the late 90s and the early 2000s, India rarely saw overseas wins. They rarely saw overseas draws for that matter. As an Indian fan, you just accepted at a certain phase that India will do well at home, just bring on the turning tracks, unleash the Kumblays and the Harbhajans, and we'll win comfortably at home, and then because overseas we'll go and get thrashed anyway, right? So I think it became easy to take for granted the performances at home. And then when suddenly the Indian team started performing well overseas, now it just seemed to be like an overcorrection in terms of reaction, where suddenly we only started talking about Sena, like performances in Sena
Yeah.
countries. And suddenly performances in India didn't matter or didn't matter as much, which is unfortunate, but I think that is why. Um, and Pujara is actually like a very, he's probably like the last of that generation for whom that will actually somewhat come close to mattering because obviously this current generation of cricketers, they've grown up in a very good time when India's, for the last 10 or so years have been way, way better overseas than, the generation before. So I think that'll be the last time we'll see that kind of, I'm hoping that'll be the last time we'll see that kind of reaction. But of course, fandom is very fickle. So let's talk about I guess let's talk about any knocks that kind of stood out for you. Honestly, for me, it's just one. Not to say obviously he's had so many high quality knocks, but in terms of memorable knocks, because again, Pujara is not the kind of it's not a Kohli, right? He doesn't have innings that make the highlight reel, for instance. Or for that matter, even he's not even like a Rahane, right? Like Rahane, obviously, whose record is not as impressive as a Pujara or Kohli, still you can watch him bat all day long. Whereas Pujara, like nobody wants to watch him bat, but you still need his performances. Obviously, and this might be some recency bias as well, but I've talked, about this before that the GABA win in 2021 is like one of my all-time favorite memories as an Indian cricket fan. And everyone will remember Pant's heroics, Shubman Gill's knock at the top of the order, Washington Sunders hooked six, those indelible memories. But the ones that don't will not always make the highlights reel, or if it does, it'll be more for the knocks that he took, rather than for the runs that he scored. Pujara's 56, that was very instrumental in stabilizing one end, and I think that knock, in many ways, was a perfect representation of Pujara's role in the Indian team over the years. Because yes, he always like sucked up, like whenever the opposition like got into groove, he was able to like kind of just get stuck in at one end and make sure that the other batters could almost like bat around him. And he would get the runs, the big centuries, sure, all of that. But more than anything else, it seemed like his role in the Indian team was just to be like essentially Dravid 2.0, where just be like the rock, just like hold up one end, let the other, flashier batsman get going at one end. So that knock kind of was a perfect encapsulation of Pujara's career, and more than anything else, it was what the team wanted from him because I think there will be many who argue that Pujara, like when he gets going, he can be pretty, like very flamboyant in his stroke making as well, but we rarely got to see that. And so I think that knock in Brisbane for me will always be like if I was to pick one knock, I would pick that one because that was so instrumental in India winning that game and the series. But people will always talk about Pant and Gill to some extent, and Pujara will just be like the guy who took all the body blows and contributed to some extent. Like that is Pujara's career in a nutshell.
Yeah, that was definitely a great knock. I think the key thing to remember there is like he definitely has the pull shot. He's played that
Hmm.
so in so many innings before and after. and he just decided it was too risky for this situation, and decided to just keep taking it on his body. And I don't know the count, but it was quite a few blows that he
Yeah.
had, and he wasn't even trying to defend it because they had a short forward short leg for him. So really, really brave knock, and it speaks to his grit. I think the one that I remember really well is from the 2017 series against Australia. Again, Australia being his favorite nemesis. And that series in particular was such a fantastic series. It was, very closely fought. The pitches were pretty tiring as well, pretty tough as well. So, there was a situation in Pune where I think India was bundled out for 108, and we were at a point about to lose a series at home, which at that point was, extremely rare, especially considering that team, the likes of Ashwin, Jadeja, Pujara, Kohli, Rahane, all of them close to peak, with KL Rahul doing really well as well. So that was a great team with, of course, Umesh Yadav and Ishant Sharma to support. And they were on the risk. They were at the risk of losing that series, and Pujara just batted and batted and batted at Ranchi. He played the longest innings that an Indian has ever played, over 525 balls, or 525 balls, and he scored a double hundred. Batted really well with Riddhiman Saha at a point when the game was actually pretty much in Australia's favor. They had scored 400 and they were in a really good position. So there was a really good chance that we could have lost that game, and the series could have been all wide open. But that, in my mind, was a critical knock because, again, one of those knocks where it just he just never felt out of control. It felt like whatever they could throw at him, whichever spinner came onto bowl, it just felt like he was completely in control.
Do you think that we ever got to see a Pujara in full flow, in the sense that, did you ever think that he was holding himself back because the requirements of the team, the demands of the team was such that he had to essentially shelve any kind of attacking instincts, even if it were to kind of like come forth? Because I remember there was this huge controversy at one point with like Kohli and Ravi Shastri, where I think it was implied that they were not happy with his, the rate that he was scoring runs at. Uh, do you think that was very intentional, or it was just him recognizing his strength was just to like just hang in there?
I mean, I think it was somewhat intentional. I will say that at the beginning of his career, he did play a lot more strokes. So the 2012 England series that I talked about, where he scored a double hundred against, I think in Ahmedabad maybe, that game he was batting very freely. Same thing with the 72 that we discussed, 72 of 90 odd or 89 balls. So that was a very free flowing innings. So he certainly had the capability when, of course, the pitches weren't. Rank turners, but I think he definitely shelved it to maximize his chances. And actually, after the 2021 series, which we won, R. Ashwin again had on his YouTube channel, had a really interesting, like, he had a bunch of interviews, so some with R. Sridhar, the fielding coach. Then he even had the batting coach join him. And one of the things they discussed there was, why does Pujara not step down to a spinner and hit them over mid wicket? And they were talking about how they keep pushing and asking Pujara to do that because they know he can, but he just never takes the spinner on. And his response was a very measured, well, if I hit them for a four, they're going to put a fielder on the boundary and then I'm going to get only one run. Instead, I'm going to keep chipping down and pushing it for two every single time, and they're not going to put a fielder on the boundary. So it was like, obviously, these cricketers think about every little aspect of their game, and that was also well thought. I think the whole controversy or the whole piece with Ravi Shastri and pushing um, him to bat a little bit quicker. That happened around the 2018 time period when India was visiting England, and he was also dropped for a test match. And I think to some extent, I see Ravi Shastri's point, and I say that because that was the time when pitches started getting really, really bowling friendly. 2017 is when, like, the likes of Jared Kimber and some others call, the pace bowling pandemic. And they say that because, yeah, bowling was the bowling depth in various teams was very good. Every team had four really good fast bowlers. The pitches were really friendly. So 220, 250 was a good total. And in that era, it was almost as if there's a ball with your name on it if you just try to keep batting. And that's certainly the period where he got a little bit stuck, trying to rotate strike or contribute a lot. But having said that, he came back really strongly in that same series, the fourth test, which I was lucky to watch live. He scored 135. And so it was a strong comeback from that perspective. He showed that his methods could still work. And in that innings, he did bat a little bit faster. So whether it was the right way of pushing Pujara by Ravi Shastri is, only the man can tell. But I definitely see the point that they were making, considering how pitches were getting more and more challenging.
From Virat Kohli's MCG 6 against Pakistan to Bumrah's stump-destroying Yorker to Ollie Pope, incredible things happen on the cricket ground. We also get iconic lines off it, like Siraj saying, "I only believe in Jesse Bye." There are so many incredible moments that cricket fans just never forget. And now you can wear them on your chest. Free Hit Gear has launched a line of amazing t-shirts and hoodie designs. Passionate fans in India can order through their website, freehitgear.com, while fans abroad can use Free Hit Gear on the Etsy store to have items delivered to them. Order now with the code GOODAREAS, or one word, to get a limited time 15% discount, and you can wear a t-shirt like this one right here.
And that's the push and pull, isn't it? Because everybody talks about play your natural game. Like, don't do something that doesn't come naturally to you. Like, play to your strengths, and that'll help more than not. But then on the other hand, you also have to balance like your team's requirements of that particular, be it a series, be it a game. It's like what you need. Like, and sometimes as fans, we look at stuff from the outside, and it's easy to criticize a player for either like batting too slow. But what if it was a team requirement or the
Mhm.
team's ask? Now, obviously, in this situation, it's slightly different because the team did want him to score faster, but it's about a player trusting his game. Um, I personally think I would lean more towards a player playing his natural game and trying to make that fit within your team's plans rather than trying to, force a player to change what's brought them success so far. Speaking of which, Pujara said in his announcement that all good things must come to an end. And I think it did come to an end a lot sooner than what any of us would have liked. What is the big factor that you would ascribe to his downturn in form over the years and kind of, he didn't feature in India's plans over the last 2 years or so. And even, the most recent England series, India was searching for a number three. In fact, we can say that since Pujara has been out of the team, India's not found a suitable number three. And still, they never went back to him, even though he was scoring bucket loads of runs in county cricket. What do you ascribe that downturn and that kind of hastening of his career?
I mean, I do think towards the end of the career, the reflexes, the eyesight, do weaken, and that's been true for most batters in history, like 34, 35 plus. Their eyesight, their reflexes definitely start to go down. On top of that, opposition bowlers have a lot more information on what a player likes, doesn't like, and all of that. So there's that sense of targeting their specific weaknesses. So that definitely plays, those two things definitely play an aspect. But the third thing is very much what I just talked about, like the pitches. I think if we were still playing in the 2010s era, the Dravid, Tendulkar, Ganguly, Lakshman, and those people played in eras which had really flat tracks. Dravid recently mentioned that in his time the goal was to win a test series, like a three-test series or four-test series, 1-0 or 2-0. Like they knew that there would be a couple of really flat pitches. So if Pujara was playing in that era, I think he could have been playing even today, even till the age of 37. But the truth is, like, he was playing in a much more tougher era where, as I said, like there's always a ball which is going to have your name on it. So you had to sort of understand that, yep, in certain conditions, like in Australia, for example, it makes sense because the kookaburra stops doing too much after the 30-35 over mark. Um, and so in those conditions, it made a lot of sense to have somebody like Pujara because he would just, bat that period out. Even if he scored 40 or 50 runs, he would make things a lot easier for others. But in a lot of other conditions, they realize that the conditions are not really getting any better. So even if somebody gets 30 or 40 balls, that's as good as Pujara getting 30 or 100 balls. It's not really changing the conditions or making it easier for the next batter, and they decided to move on from him. So I think it was a fair call overall. I think his game, while it had deteriorated maybe slightly, I think the cricket, the way it was played, moved on from him. That's just the unfortunate part of it. It's the same way how you might have somebody who is an excellent ODI player today, and yeah, the game's just shifted to T20 cricket, and there's very few ODIs, and scoring rates are in ODIs are much higher. So suddenly, that player finds himself out of favor. It's that sort of a situation. The game has just evolved a little bit differently with World Test Championship and the need to win every home game. Every team is preparing really spicy pitches, and that certainly caused his downfall.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm sure it would have been kind of a tempting idea to go back to Pujara recently, especially for the most recent England tour. But for all the reasons you mentioned, I think it was for the best. But that doesn't in any way diminish what he has achieved, especially when he was at the height of his powers. And you had an interesting question. Are we going to see batters of his pedigree or style anymore? I think we will. You know, I'm uh I'm cautiously optimistic that there is still room for his style of batting. And obviously we're talking about Test cricket because that style is not anymore valid for the shorter forms. But sometimes I look at players around in other for other teams in international cricket today, and I'm like, who else is out there who can bat like long and who can kind of weather the storm? Like it seems like most batters who are raised up on this diet of T20 cricket, if they're under strife for a certain amount of time, they try to hit out, right? In many ways, that's almost the ethos of basketball, where it's like, listen, rather than taking 20, 30 balls without scoring a run and then getting out, why don't you just like for those 20, 30 balls, you could probably convert into 40, 50 runs and then get out. Um, Whereas someone like Pujara, that batter of his pedigree, and that's how most batters used to be in Test cricket for decades, is like see out the new ball, or just like if the bowlers are on top, just hang in there. Let them give you everything that they've got, but all you need to do is just hang in there. I think there's still room for because that adds flavor to Test cricket. If everyone starts scoring at a strike rate of 100, it's not fun anymore, right? Which is why I've sometimes struggled with basketball for that reason. It sure is entertaining up to a certain extent, but after a point, it's like when you see scores of 300 or 400 continuously, in one day cricket, or scores of 200 in T20. If that happens again and again, or it happens frequently, it loses its charm, right? And I think there's something about a batter who just like stays there all day, just blocks you. And like, Australian bowlers to this day, they talk about, Nathan Lyon, Josh Hazlewood, all of them talk about the trauma of having to bowl to Pujara, knowing that he's neither going to get out, he's not going to score runs, he's just going to be there like a thorn in your side. And it goes beyond just runs scored. It goes to how disrupt the momentum or affect the morale of the opposition, where they're just like, just mentally exhausted as well. Um, Now, as a question for the question of are there batters of that style? I think there are. I think there are a lot of them in domestic cricket, but I think we tend to lean towards the ones who make the name in IPL and who are really attractive stroke players. Uh, I'm very optimistic. I think we right now, obviously, India has struggled to find someone like Pujara. Uh, but I would be shocked if there was no one like that in domestic cricket anymore. I can't think of any name right now, obviously, because then that person would probably have made it to the test squad by now. But I would think there's someone out there grinding away patiently, just waiting for their chance. Um, yeah, can you think of any players like Pujara these days, even in among other teams?
Yeah, so I think the two people that came to mind right away was Usman Khwaja. Definitely still a very traditional bat, takes a lot of time and, strike rate in the 30s, late 30s, high 30s, low 40s. Um, Greg Brathwaite was the other one that came to mind.
That's right.
So there's definitely a few which are still batting in that method, but remember, Brathwaite has just lost the captaincy for West Indies. West Indies, anyways, don't play a lot of Test cricket. Usman Khwaja is 38, if I'm right, maybe even 39.
He's struggling for
Uh,
runs too.
and he's struggling for runs. So there's a good chance that within maybe like after the Ashes at the end of the year, if he does get picked, that might be the end of Khwaja. So all in all, I think that style of batting is definitely phasing away. And I really do think it has a lot to do with the whole emphasis on winning every home test and trying to make it to the WTC final. Um,
Right.
I think unless the pitches change, obviously England is not picking up Pujara like batter like a Dom Sibley or somebody like that anymore because of their strategy and they're making sure the pitches are according to that. They're flat wickets. Um, but yeah, I really don't see any major players coming through which bat in that fashion. And somebody like Joe Root, who was not Pujara, didn't have a strike rate like Pujara, but still a traditional batter. Even he's adapted to his team's new
Right.
mantra. So all in all, I do think that's going to go down and down. And the other aspect is, I think youngsters nowadays, even if let's say they only want to play Test cricket and they don't really want to play IPL, the truth is like at 8, 9, 10, they're going to play T20 cricket. They're going to see hitting and power hitting and all of these things being inculcated in their routines. So they're going to have more stroke play than usual. Now, does that mean that they, like Sai Sudarshan in the England series, he scored 26 of 88 balls. So he took his time when getting in. Obviously, that he has a proven IPL record, so he can play his shots, but maybe some of them do find the balance and make it to Test cricket. Uh, but I do feel it's going to really, be a big question based on the pitches that we are going to see in the next few years.
Well, on that note, let's go to, just the Indian test team of the last decade, decade and a half. Um, or even just since Pujara made his debut. Obviously, we talked about, the Kohli, Rahane, the Ashwin, Jadeja, like how they formed the core of this team, along with Pujara to form. I think in my memory as an Indian cricket fan, I don't think I've seen a better Indian test team than the one that was under Kohli. So between 2014 to even about 2017, I think that was probably one of the highs as a Test cricket fan. And to me, Pujara was such an integral part of that Test side, integral to its successes. And it again, now we see one by one all of those cricketers kind of stepping away either from all formats or just like, the Test format. How do you reflect back on that era for Indian Test cricket?
Undoubtedly the greatest era for Indian cricket. 2014, you said 2017, but really up till 2021, they did exceptionally well. Two series wins in Australia. Will be disappointed that they didn't come away with a win in South Africa and England, but nonetheless, they had some really great contests there, won good games. New Zealand was probably the one that didn't tour as much, but wins in West Indies, wins in Sri Lanka, and I know like Sri Lanka we take for granted these days, but The generation before, the Tendulkar generation, actually didn't win in Sri Lanka until I believe all the way till 2010. So it was actually even 2010 was a draw if I remember right. That was Murali's last series. So it that way, like they did actually a really good job of winning in Sri Lanka in 2015. Um, Incredible record at home. Obviously, that we lost our first series just last year after Pujara had already left. So just quite an outstanding team from India's standpoint. Probably the best, definitely the best test team India's ever had, and arguably like the top three in cricket history. Because if you look at, obviously people talk about the West Indies of the past, Pakistan of the 90s, Australia. Um, Many of those teams are really, really great, of course. South Africa around the 2012 mark was a very, very good team, but this team just had performances all across the world, winning a lot of test matches and challenging teams in conditions that didn't always favor them. Um, Undoubtedly, like we're gonna have a dip, and I think we're in that dip already. We saw like a tough series in Australia played out. We somehow managed to draw the series in England thanks to some incredible individual performances. But yeah, it's going to take a little bit to form that core again, make sure people know their roles and find that right strategies long term so that the newcomers all settle in and find their spots. And of course, all of this also depends on, a lot of people always forget, like they'll say, oh, India is number one or was number one in these last few years because the other teams are crap. Well, they look crap because the Indian team is much better, just the way, the early 2000s Indian team looked crap because other teams were better. So it's all relative. And I think the fact that Kohli took over captaincy in 2014 when India was ranked number seven, and then India won the Test Mace, which was the annual award given for the team ranking number one for I think it was 4 consecutive years. That says a lot about where Pujara and company took the Indian team.
For me, as an Indian cricket fan, the barometer for success is how teams do in Australia, right? Because growing up, you couldn't beat Australia. Like you went to Australia, if the Indian team toured to Australia, I was just like, they're gonna get thumped. Like it's gonna be a whitewash for sure. It's just gonna be like question of how badly. And I still remember those, the 99 horror series. Um, and then, just subsequently, like every tour, even if they managed to win one game here and there, they would still get beaten. And it only seemed to like really improve after what, 2007 was it? When Dravid scored that 241 at Adelaide, and I think it was a
2003.
draw 2003. Yeah, that's right. And wasn't that a drawn series?
Yes, 1-1.
Um, and to me, that was like, okay, it's possible to draw a series and not just lose. Um, so the fact that as an Indian cricket fan, when you've been watching Australia demolish all the other teams, and you're just like glad that India can at least beat them at home, to the point where in the last three tours, tours of Australia, India's won two of them. And we take that for granted now, and we're like we were mad when they didn't win in the recent one. But I'm like, why are we, the fact that we're even having this conversation that we're like mad at the Indian team for not winning when for the longest of times you couldn't even think about winning in Australia. That's how much the Indian team has improved over the last decade, where we're taking this for granted. And so I will always miss that moment. And I think as Indian cricket fans, we just need to realign our expectations because obviously you got a new coach, you got a very new and young captain. Uh, we're still trying to fit in or fill in the number three position. We're trying to find reliable bowlers to help Bumrah. And I know we have Siraj, and we have spinners like Sundar and Kuldeep and all of that, but they don't yet have the pedigree that the legends like Ashwin and Jadeja had for the longest of time. We don't have players of the pedigree of Kohli and Rahane, let alone if you want to talk about Tendulkar and Dravid. So there's a lot of work to be done for the Indian Test team, but I remain optimistic because the one good thing about having a very young and inexperienced team is like you can only get better, you can only gain more experience. And so I think we just have to realign our expectations. I don't think they're going to make it to the next WTC final, let alone win it. But I think if they can hold on or develop a core around which they can build and get more players, fill the slots, I think we can get back to that golden era of Indian Test cricket, but definitely need to realign our expectations. So let's jump from this format to the shortest format of the game. Obviously, something that's been in the news over the last few days has been the selection for the Asia Cup, for the men's Asia Cup T20 squad. What are your thoughts on it?
I was a little surprised to see Shubman Gill back. Not, I mean, I really like Shubman Gill, and I think his capabilities are, he's an immense player. I feel like he's going to figure out every format. I don't doubt that. But considering how well India has done in the past, year and so, like even after the World Cup win, we had a couple or three people retiring in Jadeja, Rohit and Kohli, um, and we had people come in like Abhishek Sharma, and they've filled those slots really well. They've done exceptionally well, and I was very surprised to see Gill back, and not just like even if you were thinking, hey, this guy's in the form of his life, and maybe there's a chance, if somebody like Sanju Samson has a bad run, we'll try him in. I would still understand, but the fact that he was also made vice captain surprised me quite a bit. I think really India's only weakness from a T20 lineup perspective was the fact that their 8, 9, 10, 11 do not bat at all. Like we have scenarios where Kuldeep is walking in at 8 and not to, I think he's a decent batter from, if you're trying to defend the ball, but he's not a hitter at all. Bumrah would
Yeah.
sometimes bat at 9 or 10 in that lineup, and again, he's not a really a guy who can bat. So the batting depth is really the only issue that India had, and somehow they decided to try and fix something else, which surprised me quite a bit.
So
Um,
these are the bowlers we have. So Akshar Patel, Kuldeep Yadav, Harshit Rana, Jasprit Bumrah, Arshdeep Singh, Varun Chakravarti. Um, I guess you could argue Akshar Patel is an all-rounder. He can bat a bit. Abhishek Sharma, he doesn't really bowl as much, but either way, he's at the top of the order as well. And Shivam Dubey, I mean, he's really a batter who can bowl every now and then. So you're right. There's not a lot of batting, which I think, the batters really have to do the heavy lifting. You would hope that they perform so well that, we can afford to just play with seven players who can bat and not have to rely on the bowlers. There was a lot of talk about, okay, let's talk about Shubman Gill first. Um, I am actually happy that he's back in the T20 squad because I really feel he has the potential to be an all format great eventually over time. Um, should he be the vice captain? That I guess is debatable, but I understand the reasoning for it. I mean, if he did not have the England series that he just had, they probably would have been like, all right, let's let him work on his test format captaincy. But I think we're all on that high of like that drawn series with Shubman Gill just having a bumper series with the bat, and suddenly it's all, if you're like buying stocks, like you're gonna buy stocks in Shubman Gill. And so it kind of makes sense. And obviously Surya Kumar Yadav is, he's the quote unquote wrong side of 30s. He probably will have what, one or two more T20 World Cups in him. And I think they're looking for a long-term successor. And obviously Hardik Pandya, for whatever reason, has fallen out of favor. Akshar Patel is there, but I don't know if it seems like they're only looking at him as a stopgap replacement whenever the big players, the senior players rest. So I understand the reasoning that they feel like Shubman Gill can really take over since he already is captain of the test side. and it's in all likelihood going to take over from Rohit whenever Rohit is done. Which brings into question, is it wise to have one player as captain across all three formats? Because I don't think any other team does that anyway. I think every major team now has kind of split it in some form or the other. Um, but personally, I'm fine. I'm fine with Shubman Gill back. I know there's talk of, how it'll displace, Abhishek and Sanjay Samson's partnership at the top. Um, but if it was anyone else, I probably would have been like, why are we breaking a good partnership that's developing into like a destructive, an almost all-time destructive T20 opening partnership for India? But if anyone wants to do it, I think it would be Shimon Gill, and the fact that they see leadership potential in him for the shortest format of the game, and I think his stint with Gujarat Titans also, helps. Like he's done reasonably well with them. So yeah, yeah, that's what I feel about Ship and Gill selection. I'm not surprised or disappointed at all in that.
I think the selection didn't. I don't mind the selection. As I said, I think it's the vice captaincy that surprised me a little bit. I
Right.
think Akshar Patel was doing a good job, and he's also pretty young, so I don't really see the need for change. Like he's 28 or so, so he has a number of years ahead of him. But yeah, it's interesting how um, somehow Indian cricket seems, or I guess that's true for most cricket. There's always Pujara and sorry, not Pujara, Pat Cummins and the odd bowler captain, but otherwise every team likes to
Yeah.
have their have a batter as the captain.
If at all, if anything at all, I think Bumrah would have been a good pick for vice captain because, I mean, 4 overs a game, that's like seems like the perfect amount for
Well, he's not
Bumrah.
going to play a lot of T20s, though. I think he's going to get a lot of rest in T20s apart from, the Asia Cup
Right.
or the World Cup because of the test schedule and IPL and all of that. So, I,
Yeah.
I mean, it's understandable. I think Pujara honestly would be an outstanding test captain, but yeah, it's just his workload which needs managing. I do want to talk about the other big news of it, though, like the exclusion of Shreyas Iyer and um, Yashasvi Jaiswal. What are your thoughts on that?
I think I agree with Ajit Agarkar's statement that, it's not their fault. I mean, they're being Jaiswal or Shreyas Iyer. Um, I mean, who are you going to replace them with, though? Because Abhishek Sharma has done really well. He's the number one T20 batter in the world. You have Sanjay Samson, you have Shubman Gill, who I think the other argument can be like, does Gill really make his way ahead of Jaiswal if you're being like just going by numbers? But obviously they see, again, we talked about it, leadership potential in Gill, fine. So Jaiswal doesn't really have someone that he could replace and not be kind of like universally like, okay, yeah, that seems like a good call. I think it's just bad luck for Jaiswal at the moment. And the good thing is he's young and he'll probably get his chance, be it, loss of form or injury. I think he will get a chance eventually, but I just see that as bad luck. And Shreyas Iyer too, to some extent, I think it's bad luck. And I was like thinking, okay, who could he replace? And I'm looking at, okay, there's Tilak Verma,
Possibly
who
Tilak Verma. Yeah,
you're thinking Tilak Verma because I thought he he scored two back-to-back hundreds, right? Last year or this year. I don't know when that was, in which series. There seem to be so many of them anyway. So I'm like, okay, they probably cannot take Tilak
yeah,
Verma out. There's Rinku Singh, but I think Rinku Singh's role they're trying to push as a late order finisher. So they probably
right.
don't want to upset that. There's Shivam Dubey. Now, if anything at all, I think Shreyas could have made his way instead of Shivam Dubey. Um, but I think again, it's similar to Jay as well. I think it's bad luck. I definitely think it's more reasonable that Shreyas Iyer should have found his way inside more than Jaiswal. Um, but again, overall, it's a stacked batting lineup, and you can't
Yeah.
really find too many strong faults.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the only one I could think of is Tilak Verma, but yeah, he's done really well. So there's no case of dropping him. Um, as you said, Rinku is the one that a lot of people have said should have been replaced by Shreyas, but Shreyas Iyer doesn't play at 6 or 7. That's not
Right.
where he's been successful. So there's no point of trying that. I think between Hardik, Dubey on some tracks, and then um, Rinku, that's a really good finishing lineup. So, and then of course there's Akshar. So there's games where Akshar might play at eight, which is an extremely good batting lineup. Like I don't think
Yeah.
at that point you need 9, 10, 11 to bat too much.
I hate to bring this up at all, but if it's Indian team selections, there's always some controversy around it, and people will talk about favoritism, politics, and all of that. And there was this chatter that Shreyas Iyer is probably not as well liked by people up top, or maybe Gambhir doesn't want Shreyas Iyer. How seriously do you take any of this, or do you think it's just more just noise than actual substance?
I mean, I do think it's noise. Because there's obviously there might be a slight aspect to it that hey, Gambhir prefers X player over Shreyas Iyer, for example, but that is the job of a coach. Like the job of a coach is to have opinion. Like if he's
Right.
supposed to be, I mean, obviously he's supposed to be unbiased and make reasonable decisions. That is 100% true, but he obviously needs to have an opinion to run a team, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Um, I do think people always forget that Gambhir is not running the whole country or the whole BCCI. Like there is Ajit
Right.
Agarkar, who's clearly a strong voice. Like imagine the likes of Rohit and Kohli being pushed into retirement after both, in Australia, talking about another series and playing on
Right.
and all of that. So they're strong characters and they've clearly have enough power there between Ajit Agarkar and Gambhir to push even legends out. So to think that Gambhir is making, or whoever you dislike, Ajit Agarkar, if you dislike Ajit Agarkar, is making all these ridiculous calls or has favoritism, is a little bit overrated. I do think it's a combined decision. There's a bunch of selectors who weigh their opinion, and then obviously the captain has his opinion as well. So yeah, it's definitely a little bit overblown, but at the same time, maybe like, it could be not that Gambhir or Ajit Agarkar don't like Shreyas here. It could be just that they just don't see four being, they think he's perfect for four, and they just don't see four or five being a slot that is going to open anytime soon, which is completely reasonable.
Yeah, and who knows, maybe if Tilak Verma or Rinku Singh debate, like they all struggle in T20s this year, and there will be an SOS center Shreyas Iyer ahead of the World Cup next year. So he may be back sooner than you think. The only other thought that I have about this squad, there was I read online that okay, there's not enough batting strength among the bowling unit. We don't have bowlers who can bat. More importantly, you don't have bowlers who can hit, like give that late order impetus, score a few sixes here and there. And that is why someone like Harshit Rana got picked over Prasidh Krishna. Um, I don't have any strong feelings about Harshit Rana's inclusion over Prasidh Krishna. I thought Harshit Rana is a pretty decent T20 bowler, and I would give him more opportunities before saying that he's only picked for his ability to hit a few sixes here and there. But that did lead me to think that it's time to invest in an all-rounder, similar to Hardik Pandya, who's there, but we need another pace bowling all-rounder, ideally. We already have Akshar as a spin bowling all-rounder, but someone like a Nitish Kumar Reddy. Obviously not the finished product, and it'll probably be a while before he is. But I think it would be worth investing in him. Obviously, he's had a few memorable IPL knocks here and there. Obviously, he's shined a little bit in Test cricket. Uh, but I think he has that ability to fit in the T20 side if he is groomed for that kind of role. So obviously, I don't think it's going to happen for this upcoming World Cup, but probably for the next one. I think it's worth investing in him and just like developing his skills, or maybe like extra attention paid to him. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't disagree at all. I think the IPL and their impact sub rule is not helping in this case because you
Mm,
saw Shivam Dube being used just as a batter. I think if India really needs to create and develop these all-rounders, let's give them a chance to bowl. And like even Washington Sundar, for that matter, bowled very little. And similar was the case with Nitish Kumar Reddy, even though he was not used as an impact sub because he's a really good fielder. He didn't bowl as much because you just have six bowling options using that impact sub. So I
Right.
think that is definitely playing against India. I don't know how that works long term, but having said that, I do agree Nitish Kumar Reddy in the shorter formats has potential to become that batting all rounder. Um Shivam Dubey, I don't necessarily have a problem with. I do think he's a pretty fine, deputy all-rounder to Hardik Pandya and Akshay Patel. Both of them are very, very strong in both domains, so they're pretty solid. But yeah, it would be good to think long term and start thinking of Nitish Kumar Reddy, and he's already played a few T20s, so that's good. And the other one that comes to mind is of course Riyan Parag,
Mm.
another very solid batting all rounder. He bowls a little more than Abhishek Sharma and definitely bats really well in the middle order. So that's another one that's a hard miss. He didn't necessarily do too much wrong, but it's a tight lineup to pick 15.
Yeah. Riyan Parag, potentially the next captain of Rajasthan Royals. But that's, again, another a conversation for another day. Let's finish by talking about the upcoming Women's World Cup in India. Obviously, along with the Asia Cup squad selection for India for the Indian men. They announced the World Cup squad for Indian women for the upcoming World Cup here in India. What are your thoughts on the upcoming tournament as well as the team selection for India?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously don't can't call myself an expert on women's cricket, so I guess I'll leave the selection to it. I will say that there's definitely a couple of injuries which have probably hampered, like Shriyanka Patil, for example, was doing really well for India and then has been injured on and off for quite a while. So there's a few injuries that have hurt India's chances, but nonetheless, a very good squad overall. Some exciting batters, and then the likes of I think I personally feel like somebody like Jemima Rodriguez has grown quite a lot when she came in. I mean, she's still very young, but when she came in, there was a lot of talk about her potential. But now I think she's showing game after game, scoring consistently, and she's always super good in the field as well. So yeah, I think the Indian team is at a good spot. Um, Playing at home with the spin attack, the spinners, spinning all rounders that they have, they should have a really good chance for sure. Um, Obviously, the when it comes to women's cricket, you just can never rule out Australia and their might. So it's going to be a challenge for sure. Um, and we'll see how they do. But I will say that I'll be disappointed if at least they don't get to the finals because they should be able to beat England, who've also had some injuries, and they recently played against England in England and did pretty well. So I do think that that should be a challenge that they can do pretty good against. Same with South Africa. So hopefully they end up at least in as the top two, but we'll see how it goes.
I have to say that, I'll echo what you said, that I wouldn't consider myself like an avid follower of women's cricket because the fact that when I read the news and I was like, where's Shafali Verma? And she's like, not there. And I was like, who's Pratika Rawal? And then I saw her record and I was like, okay, now it makes sense as far as why she is picked. Um, and I'm looking at it and I'm seeing, there are a couple of names there, but they don't really have like a long list of performances to pull from at the international level. But these are players who've performed well in the WPL, and that just like justifies all of the talk about how a WPL could benefit the Indian team in the long run. And obviously, it's taken a few years, but you're seeing it. You're seeing players who have gained attention through the WPL and building on what they've already done and at the domestic level, they're breaking into the senior team and then doing well at the international level. This is what we've been talking about, right? Like this is what the men's IPL did back when it started. It took a few years. I still remember, and I mentioned this before, the first few years of the IPL, all the big hitters were overseas. You didn't really have too many power hitters who were Indian batters. And now suddenly it's like, just like we talked about minutes ago, it's like, how do you fit all these players in? We just have so much talent. And the same thing is now happening with the Indian women. And it's so nice to see. It's so refreshing to see that someone like Shafali Verma could be excluded and people are going like, yeah, that makes sense. That's fair enough. That's a fair call. Um, the other thing that I will say is I hope this World Cup in India is similar to more like the 2011 World Cup and not the 2023 World Cup. Um, Not just in terms of like India's performances, but I hope it's also better organized. But more than anything else, I just hope this tournament brings and just building on a success of promoting the women's game over the last few years. And I think it really needs a stamp of success or a stamp of approval from the Indian public, and it's always been refreshing to see whenever I watch like highlights of like women's cricket games happening in India, there's crowd is like it's really getting there. It's no more like empty stands or just like 20, 30 people there. Now it's like half full or close to being full. So I'm really hoping the World Cup builds on what the WPL has done, what the name recognition of international players has done, and really push it over the edge. For me, especially like, from the perspective of a dad to two young daughters, when I'm watching men's cricket, like I was watching like the England and India Test series recently, and my 5-year-old is like, I want to watch the girls play. Like just to hear that, it's a good thing, because she's naturally interested in cricket, but she also wants to see someone like her play. And so we'll just like pick random highlights of some women's cricket, not necessarily international, even something like this on Willow, like, probably at the Blast or something like that, just so that she can
Yeah.
see girls, like women play. And I really hope that's what the World Cup does as well. Keep building on its successes over the last few years and really push it over the edge where we can talk about women's cricket at the same level as we're talking about men's cricket. Um, Obviously, it'll come with time, but again, as recent years have proven, I think women's cricket is on the right track, and I think an Indian win in the World Cup will probably really help supercharge it because we've seen that in history, like India winning in 1983, 50 overs. Winning the 20 over World Cup in 2007. All of that seemed to just turbocharge interest in cricket. And I think something like that is much needed at the women's cricket level as well. And personally, if it's not for India, I do hope South Africa win the World Cup because honestly, Australia have won enough. They can take a break. I think South Africa have a lot of talented players, and I hope they can win the World Cup if India don't get there, that is. Um, but on that note, I think we'll wrap it up here. Obviously, so much going on in cricket, even though it seems like a lull for the Indian cricket fan because India hasn't played anything recently. But of course, with the Asia Cup coming up soon, I'm sure we'll have more to talk about. Uh, Pujara has retired, but he's obviously doing well in his kind of young broadcast career, so all's well with him. So there's always like more to talk about, more to look forward to. Cricket moves on, and so the last wicket will be there to bring more stuff to you when it does happen. But Mike, thank you so much for hopping on a quick call, which ended up being longer than I expected, but always fun to talk cricket with you.
Absolutely, my pleasure.